Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 3 articles for you in this episode, and all the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. The first one here is off of Natural News, and it says, Brazil may soon refuse all GMO imports from the United States. There has been all sorts of talk in recent days about the incoming Trump administration's refusal to let other countries continue taking advantage of the United States in unfair trade deals. But what about when other countries decide to stop doing trade with the U.S. because the goods we trade them are toxic and destructive? This is the current situation with South American country of Brazil, which appears poised to ban all imports of genetically modified organisms, GMOs, from the U.S. because a great number of them have never undergone proper safety approvals. Brazil has rather strict guidelines for GMO approvals that the U.S. does not have. Plus, there's a major holdup, particularly in the chicken industry. While Brazil currently grows some 29 different varieties of genetically modified corn, as well as GM soybeans, there is a shortage of these commodities in the country that is causing chicken producers who require such grains as feed to look elsewhere. But the most obvious trade partner in the U.S., which currently has a glut of GM corn ready to ship elsewhere, will not be gaining Brazil as a customer. According to reports, there was not a single Brazilian import of U.S. corn in 2016, despite the fact that U.S. stockpiles of GM corn have never been larger. Companies in Brazil are refusing to buy American grain like GM corn because they know it will fail to meet Brazil's strict agricultural standards. In recent years, some of the largest commodity trading companies have refused to take certain GMO crops from farmers because the seeds used hadn't received a full array of global approvals, something that can lead to holdups at ports or even the rejection of entire cargoes, Bloomberg recently reported. The writing's on the wall. The end of GMO poisoning or lose all relevance in the global agricultural trade. Rather than risk importing potentially dangerous load of U.S.-based GM corn that will likely get rejected by officials monitoring at the ports of entry anyway, chicken producers in particular are instead choosing to simply cut their output, in some cases by up to 10%, and just deal with the losses. It is a problem the U.S. will continue to face throughout the world market unless it reverses course and starts rejecting the unmitigated spread of GM crops by multinational corporations like Monsanto. The rest of the world wants nothing to do with these contaminated crops laced with glyphosate, which have been linked to chronic diseases like cancer. According to the International Service for the Acquisition of Agri-Biotech Applications, there are currently an astounding 43 different types of GM corn being grown in the U.S., with more coming down the pipeline. This is in addition to This is in addition to the many different types of GM soy, canola, cotton, and other crops that litter the American landscape. Even in Brazil, where many different GM crops are grown, resistance to their use is growing. A labor group recently broke into a laboratory in Sao Paulo where GM prototypes were being grown. Activists destroyed the entire lot of samples, which numbered in millions because they contained a chemical pesticide known to cause cancer. Brazil also faces global trade issues itself, as Russia, much of Europe, and various other countries across the globe have definitively rejected the cultivation and use of GM crops. If Brazil, the U.S., and other countries that allow GMOs want to remain relevant in the global agriculture trade, they're going to have to make some tough decisions, and soon. Russia recently banned all U.S. corn and soy imports due to possible GM contamination, explains organicandhealthy.org. 19 additional countries in the EU also banned all GM crops, and dozens more have banned GM crops for import and growth in their country. Personally, it's long overdue to ban this GMO foolishness. Farming used to be a thriving industry and one of the main assets to America, if not the main asset. We fed the world at one time, and now we can't even feed ourselves. It's all becoming poison. The next article I have for you is off of naturalgasnow.org, and it says, let's not be walled in on natural gas exports to Mexico. There's a lot of talk about Mexico in the news. Wall or no wall, a 20% tax on imports could be retaliated and hurt our natural gas exports. We're just over 10 days with a new administration in the Oval Office, and we see Donald Trump, for better or for worse, doing a lot of disrupting. Not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I'm not here to discuss the politics or speculate on President Trump's stances. There is already way too much of that everywhere you look. Still, I don't like the idea of new tariffs on imports from Mexico, which are only likely to produce new Mexican tariffs on our natural gas exports to that country. What is interesting about Mexico trade and immigration issue is the potential ripple effect of the energy wall, and trade debate turns some heads no matter where you sit. And with the back and forth with Mexico, we are seeing how this may play out with natural gas exports to our disadvantage. Mexico is a player in the natural gas production to the tune of being in the top 20 producers. However, like many countries, they have a healthy demand exceeding their production, just as the case with our neighbors to the north. The U.S. sends about 4 billion cubic feet per day over the border. That's about 5% of our daily production, up from 0.9 back in 2010. Surrounding this increase is at the heart of a lot of jobs. The projections for daily exports of natural gas increases capacity to keep up with the demand is going to be challenging. If we currently have a 7.3 BCFD cap, and since we are already sending 4 BCFD, the demand is expected to be nearly double in the next 3 years. Mexico's electrical generation additions, coupled with more manufacturing needs, is swelling their natural gas needs. And that's from Jude Clemente, contributor at Forbes. He states here, here's his quote: over the next 25 years, Mexico's power use is expected to double. The average Mexican assumes just a third of that amount of electricity that is typical Organization for the Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, citizen consumes. Mexico's electricity demand is booming at 3 times the rate of the OECD average. Mexico has just a few days gas storage versus almost 3 months for the OECD average. Moreover, Mexico has roughly 550 trillion cubic feet of shale gas that requires outside investment and expertise to develop. In the future, natural gas will account for almost 70% of the growth in the primary energy demand in Mexico. It's safe to say that the demand for gas in Mexico is high and growing higher. Moreover, they depend on our gas to fuel their manufacturing. If the cost of gas rises too much from our pipeline liquid natural gas, then they may consider their sources. We all know Russia would be happy to take that one on. President Trump decree to move the Keystone and Dakota Access Pipeline forward shows he's favorable to pipelines and energy exports. However, with the recent talk of a 20% tax on imports of the border, the Mexican government could very well turn around and impose a tax of its own, wall or no wall. I would hate to see that the United States get into a tariff war with Mexico, as companies like One OK Partners, Energy Transfer Partners, Kindred Morgan, employ a lot of skilled tradesmen and women. I haven't been able to find job numbers for these projected projects, but if they are anything in line with the Dakota Access and TransCanada, expect construction on the multi-billion-dollar projects to rake in 12,000 and 42,000 jobs respectively. pushing the buttons a bit harder. It's a tariff war with Mexico over illegal aliens. We're threatening that many projected jobs and such a big chunk of our natural gas exports. I fully understand the pleas for immigration control and appreciate the need for a wall in that regard, but can't we find other ways to pay for it? Taxing earnings remitted to Mexico or paying for it ourselves would seem to make a lot more sense than a tariff sure to be matched with Mexican tariff on our natural gas exports to them. The opportunity costs could be staggering. From a gas perspective, we have a lot at risk, or a lot of risk, and need to be extraordinarily careful. Tariff talk is dangerous and only raises U.S. consumer prices. There has to be a better way to pay for a wall than walling ourselves in on trade. And the final article I have in this episode is off of Fox News World, and it says, Mexico to streamline academic requirements for deportees. Mexico's education ministry says President Enrique Pena Nieto has instructed that officials make it easier for Mexican students deported or voluntarily returning from the United States to enroll in the country's schools. Pena Nieto instruction is recognized, or is, try this again, Pena Nieto's instruction is recognition that the U.S. President Donald Trump could make good on his promise to deport more Mexicans than who entered that country illegally. Families have long complained about the reams of paperwork necessary to enroll children or transfer academic credits upon return to Mexico. Among the changes will be dropping costly and erroneous requirements that identify documents and academic transcripts come with a certified translation and a government certified authorization known as an apostle. The ministry's statement says a package of education reforms will be sent to Mexico's Senate that would make the changes permanent. And that's all I have for you in this episode, but there's more to come. I've still got plenty of articles, so stay tuned. If you like what I'm doing here, give it a thumbs up and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe and share it on your social media so everybody gets to hear the news.